10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome back to India on Cricket 8, your number one destination for all things Indian cricket related. As always, I'm your host, Nikesh and Megha, alongside Megha Sinha. We're here to look at the latest goings on in this season's IPL. And, what better place to start than yesterday's game? We're recording this on a Tuesday, if you are listening to us back on a podcast feed. And, Sunrisers Hyderabad breaking records once again. And RCB running them pretty close. I mean, over 500 runs, Megha, in 40 overs. Cricket's gone mad, hasn't it?
It's been a week since we last connected and we last did our podcast. But then things have changed. There's one thing that has stayed constant, and that is RCB losing. And yet again, obviously, there was this innings from Dinesh Karthik, but in the end, it was just too much for him to surmount from there. And runs being scored against RCB at the Chinnaswamy, fans being heartbroken. That's become a refrain. We see that year after year. But talk about RCB's bowling. Uh, it has been an issue. There's been much lamentation over it, but then nothing changes. And you still see your bowlers getting tanked for so many runs.
Yeah, I mean, look, bowling at the Chinnaswamy as a fast bowler is no easy task. I mean, we always see runs scored there. It's just one of those places, really. It's like a fast bowler's graveyard almost. But when other sides are able to go there and do the business and get those results against RCB, I mean, this season they've got just the one win so far this season. We're nearly approaching the halfway stage as well. So they're almost done and dusted as far as the season's concerned already. And when you look at some of the bowlers that they've had in the past, yes, they have made investments in the likes of Mitchell Starc in years gone by. I mean, Harshad Patel was with them for a while as well, and he had a lot of success as part of that franchise. But just as a unit, they just don't ever seem to click. I mean, Mohammad Siraj wasn't playing in that game, but he's been a little bit off colour. Reece Topley comes in with a couple of really good performances. You think this guy's going to be world class for them. And yesterday goes for 68 runs in his 4 overs. I mean, Yash Dayal, that experiment hasn't quite worked. It's just an absolute nightmare. And on the other hand, when you look at them with the bat, they've got the orange cap holder in Virat Kohli. Faf du Plessis back in some form. Yeah, Glenn Maxwell, almost dropped himself, didn't we? We'll get to that in a moment. And Dinesh Karthik's hitting form as a finisher and scoring lots of crucial runs at a brilliant strike rate. So the batting is almost there as to how they'd want it. In a perfect world, Glenn Maxwell would be firing as well. And then you've got a really solid unit there. But it's still pretty decent. The numbers are good. The numbers are not bad when you compare it across all other teams. But it's just that bowling, isn't it? And I don't know where they address that. They haven't got a quality spinner. Yeah. So maybe that's an issue. But apart from that, I mean, the fast bowling, just let's take a look at that. What is going? Can you put your finger on it? Is it just the conditions at the Chinnaswamy? Is it the lack of experience? Is it the lack of X factor with that extra speed? I just can't put my finger on it.
The more things change, the more they remain constant. And, we could be going back to say 2015, 2016, the conversation would have remained the same. The batters are firing, the bowlers are not contributing. Akash Deep is a part as well. Mohammad Siraj, there's this thing about Mohammad Siraj. On his day, he can win you trophies. Like he won India that Asia Cup clash, and that was some sort of jinx as well, because India had been making it that far to the finals and then not going that one step ahead and lifting the trophy. He has that in him. He has that X factor in him. But consistency, and it was for the RCB that he actually found that consistency for a few seasons, but that too has gone missing. And it's a very important point that you made. Yuzvendra Chahal, for all the time that he was there at the RCB 2014 onwards, he did deliver the goods for the team. But then there weren't other bowlers stepping up. And then you'd see whichever death bowler RCB tried, he'd be taken for plenty. Similarly, this season as well, there might have been performances here and there in the bowling department, but a lot of it also goes back to the decisions that they made at the auction table. They had that time, they had that money as well to actually shore up their bowling department. We don't see an experienced name who could actually make much of a difference. Outside the example of Sunrisers Hyderabad here, Sunrisers Hyderabad, for the longest time, they'd be that team who'd somehow manage to sneak into the playoffs. That stopped happening because of the inexperience in the batting department. They retained some of their Indian players and uncapped Indian players, but then they got somebody like Travis Head, who now is delivering the goods for them. So finally, they also have experience, pedigree in that lineup, and that's why the performances are also coming. For RCB, those boxes just don't seem to get ticked. And like I mentioned earlier, it's the same
Yeah.
every year.
Kohli continues to churn out the runs, though. Orange cap firmly still on his head, and it was a lovely sort of opening partnership between him and Faf at the top. Put on 80 in 6 overs. They gave everyone a little bit of hope, didn't they? And brilliant from Dinesh Karthik at the end as well, just giving them that sniff and keeping them in with an outside chance of maybe chasing that one down. But let's talk about the Sunrisers, though. 287 for 3, and look, we look at T20 totals and all-time totals, and maybe I'm being a little bit disrespectful here, but nobody really cares about Mongolia versus Nepal. I think that was the one, 314, the only T20 total that's higher than this. I mean, let's not talk about the standard of cricket and the standard of bowling during that particular match. In what I would consider, top tier cricket, this is the world record now, 287 for 3. Travis Head at the center of it, as you say, 102 from just 41 balls. We didn't know about a year or so ago if he had this kind of game in him. Was he a T20 player? I mean, he started scoring test centuries and started becoming a permanent fixture in Australia's test side. And then all of a sudden, played a massive role in that ODI World Cup win. And here he is in the IPL bossing it again. He just seems to do nothing wrong at the moment, backed up by the likes of Abhishek Sharma at the top of the order. Heinrich Klaasen, probably one of the best finishers in the modern game at the moment, 67 from 31. And then you've got the likes of Aiden Markram and Abdul Samad. I mean, Samad just went mad at the end, didn't he? 37 from 10, 4 fours, 3 sixes in those 10 balls. It just looks like an absolutely gun batting lineup. And then you've still got Shabazz Ahmed and even Pat Cummins, who didn't get a bat yesterday because they weren't needed. I mean, it's pretty scary. Is there a more intimidating batting lineup in the IPL?
Not, and the numbers attest to that, because Sunrisers Hyderabad, after that game against the RCB, leapfrogged the KKR team to become the team to score the fastest runs, and they've gone at over 10 per over in this IPL, which is mind-boggling. You talked about Travis Head, and there's this meme doing rounds on the internet that whenever he sees the color blue, there's something in him that gets fired up. Beat the Indian team, beat the Mumbai Indians, and now the RCB. There is a patch of blue on their jerseys as well. And apart from that, of course, the stability, the sort of course, he goes hammer and tongs from the beginning, but just the sort of assurance that he brings at the top. Abhishek Sharma, SRH invested a lot in him over the last few years, and finally that is coming off, and coming off consistently. We also have to remember that he can also chip in with his left arm spin. So we are looking at a player who can serve that franchise for a very long time to come, provided the two decide to stick together. And then again, Aiden Markram, he has been in good form this season. Last season, somehow probably captaincy took toll on his performances. And Klaasen, what a class he has been displaying last season as well. Scored huge runs for them. Before that, there were sporadic performances, but this time around, and just the fact that all of those players have the assurance that if not me, there'd be others tripping in. And they've been doing that for a considerable while now, considering that it's multiple weeks since the IPL started. So just that confidence, just that swag, and whichever team is coming in front of them, they are simply creating scores, scoring so many runs that it's just becoming difficult from there on in the chase.
Yeah, absolutely killing it at the moment. And, certainly in terms of run scoring, they're up into the top 4 as we speak at the moment as well. 8 points, 4 wins from their 6 games. Really solid start to the season. And, former champions, of course, of the IPL. It's been a few years, but they certainly look like contenders if they keep scoring those types of runs. Nobody will want to come up against that kind of a batting unit in this season's competition. Look, other batters who've been performing well of late. We've talked about Kohli, Klaasen, Head, all those guys. Dinesh Karthik, of course. Rohit Sharma, a lot of criticism at the start of the season when he was, he was getting set at the crease, let's say, but wasn't quite delivering on those big scores. It's been a long time coming, hasn't it? In 2012 was his last IPL century. Obviously, he's got a few more for India during that time, and he's been a consistent enough performer. He's won 5 IPL titles basically since the last time that he scored an IPL century. So a lot has happened in that time. He's become the captain of the country, but it was in a losing cause, his century against CSK. Just before we get onto Rohit Sharma, though, CSK against Mumbai Indians, El Clasico of the IPL, as we call it, the clash among the two most successful franchises. CSK 206 for 4 at the Wankhede, and those 20 runs at the end were pretty crucial from what Ruturaj Gaikwad, the captain, described as a young wicketkeeper coming in and hitting 3 sixes off his first 3 balls. MS Dhoni, I mean, is there nothing this man can't do? It's just mind-boggling that he's 42 years old. He doesn't play any cricket outside of the IPL. He spends time on his farm. He doesn't do social media. He doesn't do much social interaction for most of the year, really. And then all of a sudden just rocks up, trains a little bit ahead of the IPL, does a bit of range hitting practice, and he can hit the ball like that. I mean, that second 6 down the ground, just shades of the 2011 World Cup winning shot, wasn't it? That 6 over long on. It's just awesome. I mean, has he got another year in him?
And add to everything else that you mentioned, gets a surgery done, and then walks into the ground as if he never left it. But then there's a very interesting analogy as well used by you, El Clasico. Now, when that happens, you see there's a lot of fierceness, even amongst fans. They hate each other. They want their team to win at any cost. They wouldn't cheer for anyone from the opponent. But then in this particular clash, we'd see the MI fans donning that yellow jersey. That's the sort of support that MS Dhoni garners, and talk about the decibel levels. That, of course, goes crazy. And every time the broadcaster reminds us of where exactly it stands. But otherwise, MS Dhoni, the man, the phenomena, like they say, thala rather for a reason. 20 runs, eventually the difference between the two sides, and 20 runs being scored by him of just 4 deliveries. So it's absolutely amazing. And also Dinesh Karthik, because last season there was sort of lull. He decided to hang up his boots after the season. And then this season, it seems like he has reinvented himself. He had a great 2022 season, on the back of which he also got selected for the Indian team. Now, the difference between that season and this one is, when he'd be introduced slightly earlier, necessitated by the situation or a strategic call, he wouldn't get as many because he'd be used in a very super specialist role. But in yesterday's game, we saw that he walked in slightly earlier and didn't just play an impactful cameo, although in the context of the game, of course, he couldn't help RCB win, but scored plenty of runs. And similarly, in case of Rohit Sharma as well, last season, of course, he was struggling. Those ducks were much talked about, but he'd been struggling for a good 5 years. And then this season, probably riled up by all that happened around him, he has really come all guns firing. And not just that, he has been scoring big. There have been innings of 50 plus, and then we saw that 100 as well. But didn't get any support from the other side. Maybe a small partnership with Deshaun Kishan, but no other batter really stepping up.
Yeah, that was the issue, wasn't it? Although Mumbai, they have won 1 and lost 1 since we last spoke. So a little bit of a turnaround in their fortunes. They've won a couple of games this season. They're kind of still in the mix for that top 4 spot midway through the season, or almost midway through the season. They've played 6, they've won 2 and lost 4, although they've won 2 out of their last 3, which is a massive turnaround in form. And that win coming against RCB, we've talked enough about them, but how good is it to see Surya Kumar Yadav back and firing? I mean, we've talked about Heinrich Klaassen, we've talked about all these other gun players, these impact players, but I mean, I wouldn't say he's the OG because he's not been around that long at the top level and doing this kind of stuff. But over the course of the last 5 years, there's been no one better in T20 cricket than Surya Kumar Yadav consistently, particularly in the IPL. Yeah. And he's showing once again why he is the main man, and that real difference maker, I suppose, for the Mumbai Indians, because him coming in just completely transforms that side in terms of batting. And he showed it again against RCB. They chased down 190 odd inside the 16th over. I mean, that's just crazy numbers.
Absolutely. In fact, OG is a word that we might not be in a position to give to him, like you already mentioned. but he's right there at the top. And how versatile, because he played for the KKR as well before that, opened the innings for them, batted in the middle order, similarly for Mumbai Indians, was tried out in different positions, and he has excelled at every number, and he's been churning out runs year in, year out. You cannot point out in the last half decade one season where he's actually struggled. Last season as well, on the back of his struggles against Australia in the ODI series, when he came into the IPL for the first two matches, struggled, but then again found his form back and helped MI win matches. Similarly, this time as well, was coming on the back of multiple injuries, multiple issues on the health front, and then took him time to hit the ground running, but took him time to actually get to his own self. But once he got into that groove, there was no stopping him. And we wouldn't be surprised if we see him churning out more of such innings. So impactful. It's so difficult to set fields to him. And there are very few like him with the sort of consistency that he manages. Because there are a lot of players who go for plenty of orthodox shots during the course of their innings. But to manage that consistency with the sort of craziness that he brings on the cricket field, that's slightly unusual.
Yep. So Mumbai Indians march on. I mean, 52 from 19 balls, brought up his half century off just 17 balls. Just absolutely mind-boggling numbers. Hardik Pandya contributing as well with the bat, and chants of Hardik coming from the Mumbai crowd on that occasion. So, are they forgiving him slowly? We'll wait and see. But looking at the table, though, Rajasthan Royals continue to boss it as we speak at the moment. They're going to take, there's top of the table clash coming up, actually. I'm in the BBC studios at the moment. We're going to do commentary in about an hour and a half's time on that game, Kolkata versus Rajasthan. And really, when you look at all of the sides in the competition, they've probably been the most exciting. I mean, Kolkata have got a game in hand as well, so they could go level on points, and they've got a superior net run rate to Rajasthan, so they could go top of the table with a victory over Rajasthan today. 5 games played, 4 wins, scoring a lot of runs at the top of the order. When things haven't quite fired at the top of the order, that's when they've looked a little bit more vulnerable. But Rajasthan as well only lost the 1 game out of their 6 so far, and looking like an absolute machine. It's getting pretty tasty at the top of the table, and this is good to see, isn't it? When 2 sides in great form come up against each other. Who do you fancy, not in this game necessarily out of those 2, but just who do you think has got more in them and more in their squad, that kind of depth in their squad to be able to finish top of the table almost halfway through the season? Let's hear your take on it. Give us your prediction.
That's pretty tricky because we're talking about 2 teams who haven't done that well in the past. So the pedigree is not really on their side. We might just see another random team making it to the top. But between the two of those, Rajasthan Royals obviously had that season in 2022 where they made it to the finals. Joss Butler last game missed out alongside along with Ravi Chandran Ashwin, but he has got uh, that that kind of confidence to bank on, considering what he's been for the RR in the IPL in the last few games, also chipped in. So maybe Rajasthan would want the top order batters to fire the way they did last season or the season before that. But otherwise, there are things that are working for them. Riyan Parag has been in stellar form, and he has been playing extremely impactful innings. On the bowling front, they've got Trent Bolt, Sandeep Sharma when he's available. Nandre Berger has been very impactful in the literal and metaphoric sense of the word. But obviously, there is a lot of conversation around why the last over was not handed to Trent Bolt. I'd like to take your opinion on that as well, considering how good Trent Bolt has been in the power play overs, but when it comes to death bowling in the IPL, it's not been the same. But otherwise, Rajasthan Royals almost ticking all boxes. Yuzvendra Chahal, there's no department where there's any sort of issue that one can instantly spot. Similarly, with Kolkata Knight Riders, they've got their 2 West Indians firing, and firing all guns. Andre Russell, there had been a while in between when this version of Andre Russell had gone missing, more so with the bat. There'd be odd innings in between, but it just looked like maybe it's getting over, and then that's what age does to you. But then he's turned the clock round, and then this season he's been coming up with those innings. So I know I'm yet to address the topic directly because it's very tough to answer that question. Mitchell Stark as well has come back to form, and it took him time. But then, and also considering how little of T20 is played in between, last 1 year he's just played 2 T20 games. So it's all falling in place for KKR as well. RRR peaking too early, because we saw that last season as well. They were almost in a similar situation. In the first 5 games, had lost just one, and from there on couldn't even make it to the playoffs. So that's my only fear. So probably that's the reason why I tilt marginally towards KKR when it comes to between these two teams. What's your take on that, and also Trent Bolt, that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, look, Trent Bolt bowling at the death in international cricket is a completely different beast to what we've seen in the IPL. I don't know why it's not happening,
Hmm.
um, but are there any other better options for them at the death? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, we've seen other bowlers come in and do well, but look, as long as he's taking wickets in the power play, that's his main job at the moment. He's doing well in that regard, so I'm sure they're pretty satisfied with how that's working out. I just think Rajasthan are an injury away from collapsing because their their squad. You look at their squad and their depth. I don't think they've got the same depth as any of the sides really in the rest of the IPL. When you look at their first 11, very, very strong. Their first 12, maybe you'd say, with impact substitutes coming into it as well. And you look beyond that, they get a couple of players missing for a few games, and all of a sudden you're questioning who comes in. Are they good enough? What role are they going to play? And all that kind of stuff. If Josh Butler gets injured,
Yeah.
that's almost it for them at the top of the order, right? Who comes in? Who can have that kind of impact? Or
Hmm.
Sanju Samson, if
Yeah.
he, or Trent Bolt, for there's really really big players in their team who I think they would struggle to replace, even if it's for a couple of games, for a short period of time. So, given that, I think Kolkata have got more in the tank, more in the squad. They've got a game in hand. So look, if they go and win the game today, they'll be top of the table anyway, approaching the halfway stage. So really good start for both these sides. You've obviously got Chennai in the mix. Sunrisers
Mm.
are kind of breathing down their necks as well. So it's going to be pretty tight. There will be a side, I think, from outside of the top four that makes a charge.
Yeah.
It could be the Mumbai Indians, Gujarat Titans, Punjab Kings also have shown flashes, haven't they, of really good stuff in this season's IPL. Gujarat level on points, of course, with Sunrise and Lucknow. Let's not count Lucknow Super Giants out of things just yet. They've had a successful couple of seasons in their introduction into the IPL. So still a lot to play for as far as this season is concerned. I've kind of almost discounted Delhi and Bangalore. I think Bangalore most people are done with, right? They've played a
Yeah.
game more than everybody else. They've lost 6 out of 7. They're almost done and dusted. Delhi just about still fighting, but their net run rate being so poor is almost like taking an extra point off them at this stage. So I think that's not going to work in their favour either. But look, playoff race well and truly alive. Nobody quite knows which way it's going to go. It's not been predictable. It's not like the Gujarat Titans of a couple of years back where they just win almost every game in the group stage, and you know who's going to finish top. It's a little bit less predictable, which is what we like to see. But just looking down at the bottom end of the table, let's focus a little bit on the Delhi Capitals. I mean, look, again, they've shown signs of some really good stuff in their couple of wins so far this season, and in matches that they've lost. There have been individual performances. Jake Fraser McGurk has come in from Australia, made his debut, made a half century on debut. That's obviously a massive positive as far as they're concerned. Rishabh Pant being back is a positive for the whole of the cricketing fraternity across the world. And there's been one or two other individual glimpses of hope, hasn't there? But why do you think it's not quite worked out as well as Delhi would have liked this season?
And not just this season, the previous season as well. There was this time in between when Delhi began doing consistently well, making it to the playoffs. But last season was again a reminder of what Delhi Daredevils, Delhi Capitals, is really. And I got to feel for the fans of both the teams, because for them, as much things change, they remain constant. Delhi Capitals, like you mentioned, this season there have been some consistent performers, individual performers. Rishabh Pant, I'd like to zero in on that a bit. Thankfully for cricket fans, they are getting to see the Rishabh Pant that they had begun following Rishabh Pant rather for, because he'd be that batter who'd come in, go for his big shots, and back his instincts in between, with captaincy or otherwise as well, with the tag of being relatively senior in the team. He had begun getting he'd begun getting bogged down, or maybe taking that responsibility too much. Those fury knocks had stopped coming. That is back. That's a massive positive. Prithvi Shaw as well got a look in because of injury to Mitchell Marsh, and he's done well. And in the seasons that DC did well, they had Mitchell Marsh making reasonable contributions of late. But that has been missing, and then that injury striking him as well. In the bowling department as well, there's Kuldeep Yadav, who's been the sole silver lining for them, and it took him time to get started. And there's that niggle issue as well in his case, but he's been the sole bright spark. But otherwise, in that middle order, again, it's not been an issue that has suddenly popped its head up. It's been an issue that has been pestering them for a while now. In the bowling department, barring Kuldeep Yadav and Rick Nokia being taken for so many runs, they had the services of Kagiso Rabada for a very long period. And during that period, they did really well because that also coincided with Kagiso Rabada's best in the IPL. But Andrik Nokia, him leaking so many runs, his pace being used to the advantage of the batters, particularly in the death over, all of that is just not combining. Ishant Sharma, in the first game, there was some injury issue because of which he couldn't participate for the full length of the game, and that also impacted the strategy point of view as well. That also impacted DC's planning. So all of that together is just not falling in place for them.
They've got Ricky Ponting as head coach there. They've got Sourav Ganguly in the camp. They've got a couple of good brains to try and get to the bottom of what's not been working and try and put it right ahead of the final push towards the second half of the season. Still an exciting side to watch, I feel. But yeah, you're right. It's just not quite clicked for them. And Norkia leaking so many runs, I think that's been a huge issue this season. We do see it sometimes with these bowlers with extra pace, don't we? Just seems that little bit easier for quality players just to use their pace. And if they're slightly off with their line and length, it's pretty easy pickings for some of these players of top quality. So we'll wait and see if he retains his place in the side going forward for the next few matches or not. How has it sort of been in India? I mean, it's difficult, I suppose, to compare across seasons, but you know, the IPL now has been 10 teams for, 2.5 seasons now since it expanded. Has the interest levels waned? I mean, I don't suspect they have, but is it any different when IPL season approaches, or is it just as mad, just as frantic? I mean, I can imagine people like yourself who, obviously work within the sports industry and on this cricket podcast, of course, you've got to keep across all the games. It's like 2 months of just weird hours for you, isn't it? Just every evening watching the game.
Yeah.
Watching the pre-show, the post-show, whatever it might be. You're just constantly glued on the cricket for 2 months. Is it like that for the rest of India? Is it still just as big as it was like 3 or 4 years ago?
Pretty intense, right? In our case, because unlike when international cricket is underway, even when there's a tournament of the level of the World Cup that's underway, you still get some breathing space in between. But in the IPL, matches come thick and fast, and then there are days when you also have the double headers, and that going on for a period of 2 months. But then talking about people who follow it for recreational purposes, it's sort of escape for them, and the timings have also been curated keeping that in mind. So I'm in Bangalore, and if you try and look up for the tickets for the RCB matches, there are two remaining. Well, you'd not find any, and they would have gotten sold off even before the season began, just when they were up for sale. So that's the sort of madness that happens when you are in Bangalore, and the craze for RCB is just crazy. If there's an RCB match day and you decide to take a stroll outside, you'd see everyone glued to their devices, whether that's a hawker, whether that's people around that hawker, and even in terms of conversations. You could be walking down the street, but if you do not hear the match commentary and people are just randomly loitering, you'd still hear them talk about the game. So that's the level of obsession that varies from city to city. Maybe it wouldn't be as much in Delhi, and the loyalty levels are also not that high. But then, because people in Delhi tend to support various other teams as well for their respective reasons. But in general, the craze for IPL remains high, and the number of matches haven't really significantly increased. There was this period in between, that is 2022 season, when it actually felt too long. The duration was also such, but since then, that and the viewership numbers had also dipped for the initial matches. But since then, the interest has only peaked, and it continues peaking. There's no there's no particular peak that we can talk about, because we don't know where it would eventually go. There's so many markets still to be tapped, and that's what the broadcasters are doing through various engagement models. They also used to have their fan parks, wherein they'd go to smaller towns and create those screenings for the fans to be together, to have that feel of maybe not a stadium, but just that community watching together and having fun. So that craze continues. I've managed to be in multiple cities during this period, and you'd still, if you peep into people's houses, you'd still see IPL matches being on the television. So that's not a very nice thing to do, but not
Have you
deliberately.
can you verify that that's the case? Have you been peeping into people's homes in Bengaluru? And if
Well,
you are
I did,
listening in Bengaluru, just be aware that it was just Megha doing some research for the podcast.
literally.
Nothing suspicious about it at all. But look, yeah, I get that feeling as well. I was in India at the start of the IPL, and you get it's just on everywhere. Everywhere where there's a TV screen, people are watching the IPL, and the craze seems to be just as huge. And look, it's getting more and more respected around the world as well, from what I can see in the UK, as the global tournament. I mean, the ECB has talked recently about trying to do more with the 100 and get more investment into the 100, maybe looking to sell those franchises to IPL ownerships and things like that, with the view to it being the second best tournament in the world. So even the ECB, the once powerful ECB, is now saying that the best we can hope for is being second best to the IPL. And that's basically what all these other franchise competitions are vying to do, aren't they? They just want to be second best, because there's no way that you can touch the IPL in terms of popularity and money and all those other things. But look, it continues to entertain us. It's been another action-packed week. More brilliant games coming up in the next 7 days or so. So do stay tuned to us on Cricket 8. Follow our socials across Instagram, across Facebook and YouTube. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks for listening. If you're listening back on a podcast feed as well, remember to hit that like and subscribe button. You can follow both myself and Megha on social media as well. Just search for our names, and I'm sure you'll see us pop up. But that's all we've got time for this week. We'll be back with you next week for another edition of our IPL Weekly. But for now, it's goodbye.